Welcome to Looking at Lucasfilm, the podcast with a different perspective on the world of Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and all of the other entities that George Lucas, Kathleen Kennedy, and Dan, I really feel like we need to start saying Dave Filoni in here. Dave Filoni and the rest of the team at Lucasfilm have dreamed up over the past 40 years. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and my co-host, the one, the only, Dan Z. He and I are recording this on Thursday, July 23rd. And we were just talking about the big Star Wars news that broke, just a couple hours before we recorded tonight, right?
Another seismic shift in this crazy release schedule that's not only affecting movies this summer, but, all the way through 2027 and beyond.
Yeah. Okay. So for those of you who didn't see this, this was kind of bundled in with the news that Disney was taking its live action Mulan, which was supposed to finally be opening in theaters on August 21st of this year. And they just basically unscheduled it. They pulled it off of Disney's release schedule for all of 2020. And in the process, they also broke news about other big films further on down the line that are going to be impacted by what's happening with theatrical releases due to COVID-19. And, okay, so there were 3 Star Wars projects that were impacted by this. Now, mind you, none of these films officially have titles. I mean, I'm sure in-house they have titles. But what we had the untitled Star Wars #1 got moved to December 22nd, 2023. Untitled Star Wars #2 got pushed back to December 19th, 2025. And as you mentioned, the untitled Star Wars #3 got pushed back all the way to December 17th of 2027. Worth noting here that all 4 Avatar films that James Cameron is working on right now, those also got pushed back by a full year. And 4 Avatar movies, Dan, that's an awful lot of blue cat people.
That is indeed.
And also just want to reassure people, the one film that Lucasfilm is working at that doesn't seem to be impacted by this is Indiana Jones 5. That Lucasfilm production is still slated to be released theatrically July 29th, 2022. So what's your take on this, Dan? I mean, previously you've seemed okay with there being a break between, the theatrical films, so to speak, right?
Yeah, and I still am. I mean, it's another year that we have to wait, but if another year means that we have time to actually film, create and get things organized and orchestrated and ready to go, because putting on a movie is a massive production that takes up a lot of people's times and lives. And the way the world is now, it's not going to happen. So I'd rather they do it right, make sure they can do it when everybody is safe. We've hopefully got a vaccine by then, my goodness, and we can just get back to business as usual. So if you're going to wait a little bit longer to make a better quality product, then I think that's fine, because I don't know. I really don't know what in the heck these movies are going to be about, besides the fact that they're in a galaxy far, far away. So if it gives them more time to creatively get the juices going and kind of let things percolate, then I am all for it.
Okay. Now, just to be clear here, we are talking about a 4-year gap between Rise of Skywalker, which came back, back in December 2019, and untitled Star Wars #1, which again is December of 2023. But let's be honest here. We're not talking about this being a Star Wars free zone between now and 2023. I mean, this fall we'll have the second season of The Mandalorian. And meanwhile, production of that Obi-Wan limited series is still slated to get underway in early 2021. Ewan McGregor still in the title role, Deborah Chow directing as well as serving as the showrunner, and Hosni Amani and Joby Harold are writing. By the way, Dan, I was working the phones this week, largely because of that Lando rumor that was making the rounds. Did you see that, by the way? Or
I didn't. You could probably guess what I did. I
know.
completely blurred my eyes and Trying to forget about it.
Well, what's kind of interesting, the weird part of it is that when I was talking with a friend at Lucasfilm, I got a non-denial denial. And in fact, the reason I got a non-denial denial is largely because of The Mandalorian and also COVID-19. There seems to be there's an interesting group think that's kind of occurring at Lucasfilm right now, and basically, no one, and in fact, it ties in with what we started off with tonight. The impact that COVID-19 has had on theatrical releases and what exhibitors can do and what movie theaters can open and the like. And there's a lot of folks that inside of Lucasfilm that are looking at how well The Mandalorian did. And I'm not talking about the huge audience that it got, on Disney Plus, but also how well these stories and these characters are doing in retail channels. I mean, just today, Dan, I'm sitting here and Nancy just blipping around the channels and lands on QVC, and they were selling The Child. There's a version of The Child that was, being sold to people who were paying attention to that shopping channel. And the belief is that The Mandalorian has, in a lot of ways, has plowed the road to a safer harbor for Star Wars for a while, and that's doing limited series over at Disney Plus. That, first of all, Disney Plus, as we've seen, a lot of things that were meant to be released theatrically, Artemis Fowl and coming up shortly, the one and only Ivan, have wound up on that subscription streaming service and have done very well. I mean, racked up some amazing numbers. And, the belief is that, well, look, if we go there with Obi-Wan and, we go there with Lando, this is a safe space. And we don't have to worry about delivering a 2-hour-long film. If a story needs breathing space, we can do breathing space.
Plus, it gives Disney Plus content, which is something that they are always trying to make sure they have anyway. Absolutely.
But which brings me to, the next bit of news. How surprised were you by the Bad Batch announcement?
I guess it was sort of yes and no. I thought, well, that's a logical step because otherwise, why spend 4 episodes when you only have a few to put out for the last season of Clone Wars on new characters unless you're planning on investing in them? And the response obviously was huge. People wanted action figures of them. They loved the new designs, and they are very, very sharp. It certainly generated a lot of buzz on Coffee with Kenobi. So I think it's great. I mean, it looks like Dave Filoni's not going to be completely hands-on like he was with the Clone Wars. But I think it's a logical progression until, because let's face it, we really don't know the direction of the franchise besides some fun things on Disney Plus. Everything is all kind of set in that same era that we already know very, very well anyway. So I guess you just might as well keep exploring the turf that people already love.
I agree. Now, the show description, and again, as you mentioned, that these characters were introduced in season 7 of the Clone Wars animated series. So the Bad Batch is trying to find its way in a rapidly changing galaxy in the immediate aftermath of the Clone Wars. And so in a post-Clone Wars era, they take on daring mercenary missions as they struggle to stay afloat and find new purpose. I think for me, in fact, I remember reaching out to you when this press release came out. So we have Agnes Chu, who's the Senior Vice President of Content at Disney Plus. And she said, giving new and existing fans the final chapter of Star Wars Clone Wars has been our honor at Disney Plus, and we're overjoyed at the global response to this landmark series. And while the Clone Wars may have come to its conclusion, our partnership with the groundbreaking storytellers and artists at Lucasfilm Animation is only beginning. We are thrilled to bring Dave Filoni's vision to life through the next adventures of the Bad Batch. And for me, again, when I reached out to Dan, it's like that phrase, Dan Filoni's vision, that seemed pretty significant to me. And
I
in
agree
fact,
with that. But do you think that was always the plan from day one as far as putting Clone Wars on Disney Plus, that they would follow with the Bad Batch, or do you think this was kind of an idea that was sparked after the response was so positive?
I have been trying to get a straight answer on that, because remember, I had what I thought was reasonably good intel about a Star Wars Rebels series continuation, which abruptly ended. In fact, again in that same window of time that Clone Wars was airing on Disney Plus. But here's the interesting thing. I mean, Dave is the executive producer of this new show, Star Wars: The Bad Batch, but he was also the creator of Star Wars Resistance. He was also the creator and executive producer of all 4 seasons of Star Wars Rebels. So, face it, going forward, again, especially given the hands-on role Dave has with The Mandalorian, it's going to be interesting to see which of these he in fact is, as hands-on as he's been in the past. By the way, speaking of Star Wars Rebels, I was wondering if you'd seen the latest Star Wars tie-in novel. What is it? Alexander Freed's Shadowfall?
Yeah, it's part 2 of that series, of course. Yeah, and I've got the audiobook and the regular book, and it's always had some fun little. They're not really Easter eggs; they're a little more than that, but just not a ton there. But there's some clues, aren't there?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I'm totally convinced that at some point we are circling back on the Star Wars Rebels narrative, because as Dan just mentioned, this book is set Shadowfall right after Return of the Jedi, and it tells the story of former Rebel, now New Republic General Hera Syndulla. Syndulla, so close. And in one key scene, Hera is looking to continue a conflict between the Empire and wishes she had a Jedi Knight with her. And Republic leaders who were in the same meeting noticed a wistful expression pass over her face with, which makes sense. Hera was involved with Kanan, and, she had his child. And, Ezra Bridger was one of her closest friends. By the way, just a little side note here. Dan, I don't know if I should be thanking you or not. In regard to Dr. Afra, see? Yes. Again, I'm just 2 for 2, folks. Dr. Afra, I had mentioned that, that Marvel was relaunching the comic series, and you spoke so highly of the character as kind of an anti-Indiana Jones, that I ordered the first graphic novel to just sort of get a sense, taste of the character. And I have here in front of me the 7th.
Wow.
Yes, I bought all of them.
I love
and read all of them, and wanted and noticed just this week that the Dr. Afra,
yes,
the audiobook became available with a kind of startling voice cast.
It's a great one. And they sent that to me, so I've heard it already, and it's fabulous. It's extremely well produced. Aaron Adams would be proud.
Okay.
And it basically takes those first 2 books and ties in some things coming from the main Star Wars title and incorporates it in there, but it really adds quite a bit more psychological depth to Afra, to a degree that it's almost depressing to listen to her, because there's a lot of pain there, and they really explore it. And I think I just took up about 12 more hours of your life, because I think you will love it.
Okay, fine. I was kind of hoping you'd tell me to take a pass.
No, it's great. It's phenomenal.
Dang.
And
okay.
The voice work of 000 is worth the price of admission in itself.
he is so. I mean,
he's a nightmare.
but that's the thing. It just. I think the Venn diagram of this series is so hard to land. The humor, particularly of and the menace of 000, just sort of like
See, for my
again,
money, that needs to be a Disney Plus show. That would be as successful as The Mandalorian, I think.
Wow. But again, I still have this seventh graphic novel to read. That's my goal for tomorrow.
I like it.
But she's so much an anti-hero. I mean, it has these weird moments where you think she's going to redeem herself. She's made the turn. And then she rips the rug out from under you again and again and again.
And does it to herself, even.
That's true. But anyway, I wanted to thank you for just sort of putting that bug in my ear. And
I'm so glad.
But now, of course, now I'm debating, because the individual comic books for the release, the relaunch, are available for purchase. But at the same time, they're listing the graphic novel based on those. It'll be available in January of this year.
Yeah.
Or January of 2021. And I'm debating whether or not should I wait for the full. I mean, what do you typically do?
I used to buy them every monthly, and I used to do a column for Stars.com, Comic Book Galaxy. But now I just do trades because it's like you're binging it, and you can just kind of get through 12 of them in one shot. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Okay. I will give that some thought. But again, I got to finish 7 first. And speaking of Star Wars books, have we cracked our copy of The Traveler's Guide to Batuu yet?
I read 4 Star Wars books this week, and that was one of them.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy cow. Okay.
Which is quarantine,
Oh, this is true. All right. So this one is supposedly penned by Eloch Thorno, which I'm believing my little anagram-based brain. That's Cole Horton, right?
That's one of my co-authors for the Star Wars book.
Yes, it is, and we are now. It's still October 1st, right?
October 20th.
October 20th. Okay, all right. The Star Wars book, folks. I still can't believe there wasn't a book before that point that had that title.
I know.
Anyway, what did you think of the Traveler's Guide to Batuu?
I thought it was charming. I thought there were a couple of, if they were trying to keep it in world, I thought it wasn't as logical to introduce ideas with the Resistance and the First Order, but that's probably just overly technical, mythological construction on my part. I thought it was fun for what it was. I think there's a couple areas I'd like to see some major expansions, but the Aurebesh guide, the maps, was great. I was hoping for even more kind of a guide to seeing everything in Dok-Ondar's and things like that. So I don't know if that was just purposeful to just kind of lightly let people kind of dip their toes in the water of Batuu, or if there's going to be room for an expansion. But overall, pretty fun. What about you?
Well, I always worked my trap line to, when this book came out and given, for example, the obvious conversations that Cole had to have had with both the folks at Lucasfilm and the folks at WDI. So I was reaching out to friends at WDI and said, so what do you guys make of this book? And they were like, did you read the part about Galma yet? And I wanted to share this with our listeners. Galma is a short shuttle ride from Black Spire Outpost and is known as a haven for illegal pod racing and the gambling that surrounds this outlawed sport. And, the reason I got directed in to look at that is that evidently prior to the whole COVID-19 thing, Disney had been doing a lot of survey work on Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. And, it didn't seem to be landing the way they hoped it would. So in much the same way that the ride film for Star Wars, remember Star Tours had one ride film for years and years and years, and then suddenly there were multiple variations, the multiple branching thing that they did for the Star Wars The Adventures Continue. evidently they did focus grouping on this and asked people what they wanted to do with the Millennium Falcon. And one of the things that did in fact come up is being in a pod race. So,
which is so strange.
It is strange.
Who are they asking? Why don't they ask me?
Well, you see, your problem is you're not, somebody who they can get in a focus group in Glendale, California. When they're grabbing folks, it's typically within 30 some odd miles of where WDI headquarters is located, and is
Gallman supposed to be another way of saying this is for the Galactic Star Cruiser, Star Wars Hotel, or is it something else?
Well, speaking of which, the opening date of that project has definitely slid. This came up during my conversation about Millennium Falcon, and then basically, right now, 2000. I mean, the weird thing is, folks are still working on it inside. And remember, if all had gone according to plan, we would have had, soft opening in late 2020, officially opening in 2021. Now, I think we're honestly going to be lucky if, if we see that thing, the schedule for the opening of that only slide by a year. So with a soft opening in 2021 and then officially opening in 2022, honestly, a lot of it has to do with what's going on in Florida right now with the coronavirus. And, right now, in theory, the only people who are going to Disney theme parks are Florida state residents. Because, everybody else who's flying into the state first has to quarantine in place for 14 days. And only then would they be allowed to go into a Disney park. And then conversely, whenever they'd leave Florida, they'd have to do the same thing. They'd have to quarantine for another 14 days. And of course, everyone's doing that, Dan, right?
Well, sure. Well, did you see that Target has teamed up to sell some interesting Galaxy's Edge?
Yes.
Well, I wanted the Falcon. But then I saw that was $400.
But they have also that shuttle, don't they?
It has the shuttle. It has Hondo. It has Chewie. It has a number of porgs, and it looks really nice. It's even got some of that cargo equipment that's at the base of Batu. I mean, I love it. I think it's great. But $400 for something I already have 3 versions of is probably not the best idea.
As I understand it, Dan, you don't really have a collection of something until you have 3 of them.
Well, I guess we're in.
There you go. It's a collection. Well, by the way, you were mentioning, obviously these are the more expensive Galaxy's Edge, related items. But did you see where some very, very affordable Galaxy's Edge, souvenirs turned up in Alabama last month?
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Like a surplus, right? Is that why they did that?
Well, actually, to explain to the listeners here, the thermal detonators, these special Coca-Cola bottles that are shaped like thermal detonators. In fact, you were at the Star Wars Celebration when they rolled these out, right?
I sure was. Yeah.
And I mean, this was a very big deal that Disney and Coca-Cola got in bed together to create these things. And then, of course, there was the whole issue with the TSA about, we don't like you to take, fake looking explosives on planes. We're funny that way.
Full of liquid, too. Yeah.
Yeah, full of liquid. Yeah, that's 2 for 2 right there. But as it turns out, because it's a Coke product, in fact, I looked this up. Supposedly, Coca-Cola in the bottle on the shelf is good for 6 to 8 months. And remember, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, along with all the Disney theme parks, closed down in mid-March. And, there were all these items backstage that had a shelf life. And somebody at Disney evidently decided, well, if you look at the expiration date on these bottles, they go bad or they're supposed to be pulled in April of 2020. So a decision was made to, well, we can't sell these now, so let's release them to the secondary market, which is why they turned up, in a grocery store in Hartford, Alabama. And a very enterprising young man, Clayton Williams, an 18-year-old University of Central Florida student, discovered them. And evidently you could buy a 12-pack at that point for $6.99.
Wow.
So Clayton bought them all. Bought the entire, 10 cases of the stuff for $67.19. And
it's fabulous.
Yeah. So I don't know. Somewhere there's a lot of, dead. Well, more to the point, there's somebody who really has an upset stomach from drinking that much out of date Coca-Cola and Diet Coke and Fresca. So, but anyway, now we were also talking before we got started with the show tonight. So Star Wars Galaxy's Edge has now reopened along with Disney's Hollywood Studios, but not everything has opened. Now, you were mentioning, for example, Savvy's Workshop, right?
That's right.
And how, face it, the reason people went to Savvy's Workshop was that wonderful lightsaber building moment. And, and that's not going on now because it's small, tight space. But people can still get lightsabers, right?
Yeah, they can go in and get those legacy lightsabers. So I thought, well, I guess maybe there's less interaction, but you're still handing things to people and you're still look. I don't know. I found it a little perplexing that they decided to still open that space.
Yeah, I mean,
it's very small.
No. Len's been in Galaxy's Edge a number of times over the past week or so, and has been talking about, for example, the bazaar where, remember that's supposed to be a tight space where, everything, the hands on and that sort of thing. And he was talking about how displays have been moved in such a way to make it easier for people to pass through the space and shop. And I want to say he was surprised, I think, to, is it the Droid Works? Is that open as well?
That is open. They have like a bunch of plexiglass up and different things like that, so that you can still build your droids. But I think that the options are a little bit different, but it's all broken up very, very. It almost looks like a bank from the '80s, the way they've got everything separated. But apparently, people are loving it. Of course.
Well, good. And now I want to go in there and get a calendar.
Yes.
Okay. But on our last show, you and I were going back and forth about Oga's Cantina because, of course, again, Florida and supposedly shutting down the bars. And we were getting these mixed signals about, is Oga's going to be open? And if so, how? And now we have a little more info about that. I mean, Oga's is in fact open. But Len was explaining that supposedly this is because the way the legislation is written is that if you get half of your revenue for a restaurant / bar from food sales, you can open. But now, how was it you were describing the edibles at Oga's again? Or
I don't remember what I said, but
there we go.
It's
okay,
it's not that it's bad, but it's more like it's barely is a Chex Mix, and it's not really food. It's not like you're going to go in and be full. And I know this because when we were considering going, I thought, well, I should schedule lunch there to bring my family in, but we're going to be hungry because there's really not. It's not like you can get cheeseburgers or anything.
Yeah. So
I was surprised because I can't imagine that half of what they sell is that stuff. I just can't believe that's true.
Well, but at the same time, in a weird sort of way, isn't this appropriate? I mean, supposedly Black Spire Outpost is full of scoundrels bending the law. So,
yes. Well, that's very true.
Yeah. So, I mean, you get the fact that, yes, you have to buy 15 containers of Chex Mix, but hey, you're in here. Enjoy your fuzzy tauntaun.
Yep.
So,
and they are good.
Okay. Well, speaking of beverages, in a moment, I'm going to be asking Dan about what beverages he and his son had during a very special outing they went on in the past week or so.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and LifeLock has tips to protect your identity. Use strong passwords, set up multi-factor authentication, report phishing, and update the software on your devices. And for comprehensive identity protection, let LifeLock alert you to suspicious uses of your personal information. LifeLock also fixes identity theft, guaranteed or your money back. Stay smart, safe, and protected with a 30-day free trial at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Carvana lets you buy your next car on your terms. Explore a massive inventory online, filter for what matters, and find your perfect match. Then choose delivery to your home or pick it up at one of Carvana's iconic car vending machines. Every car also comes with a 7-day money-back guarantee, so you can make sure it's the right fit. Buy your car on Carvana. Delivery or pickup fees may apply. Limitations and exclusions may apply. See our 7-day return policy at Carvana.com.
Carvana.
And we're back. So, I apologize. This is me indulging myself here, folks. But Dan did this very cool thing with his son, Mason, that I would love for you to tell our listeners about.
Absolutely. So where I live is the Harvest Twin drive-in movie theater. It's near where I live. It's not near. It's about an hour and a half drive away, but it's in Gibson City, Illinois. It's voted one of the top 10 drive-ins in the United States of America. And we follow them, of course, on Facebook, and they've been showing like Jaws and all the Indiana Joneses and all the Harry Potters and just all kinds of great stuff. But of course, no Star Wars. And then I got a tip that Disney was letting theaters show The Empire Strikes Back. Sure enough, that was the case. So we did it. I contacted my buddy Corey Clubb, who helped me co-create Coffee with Kenobi. He brought a couple of his kids. Tom Gross, who does the news with us on Coffee with Kenobi, he brought his wife and his girls. And then Mason and I went out there as well. And it's an interesting way that it's set up, Jim, because you can just pay and just kind of drive and park wherever. But if you pay, I think it was $18 for your car, you got front row reserved parking spots. And I thought, well, that's worth it. I mean, $18, that's great. So we got there. You pay, I think, $5 to bring in any food that you want. And so I filled my Star Wars cooler up with all kinds of snacks and big old thing of water for us and some Capri Suns, and got the folding chairs out and opened up our trunks. And then before the movie, they show old time, movies with like the Peanuts and the hot dogs dancing and all that kind of stuff. Oh, it's so magical. And it was a beautiful night. I think it was in the 70s. We had their blankets and sweatshirts, and it was great. And everyone wore their masks, and literally even the cars were parked 6 feet apart from each other because they had different cones in every other spot, so you couldn't park there. So it was completely safe. My brother and his daughter made it out, so I at least got to see everybody, albeit from 6 to 10 feet away. But still, we were there, and the movie started. And the magical thing about it, Jim, I'm not sure if I've told the story on the show or not, but the first time I ever saw Star Wars, we tried multiple times to see it, but it was always sold out because it was such a popular thing in the late 70s, of course. And so the first time I ever saw Star Wars, I was 7 years old, and I saw it at a drive-in in New Orleans, Louisiana. So Mason, has seen Empire before, but his first experience seeing a Star Wars movie at a drive-in, he was 7, and he watched The Empire Strikes Back. So you're watching Star Wars literally under the stars, and he said to me on the way home that he hoped that when he had his son that his first Star Wars movie would be Return of the Jedi. And I thought, well, that is pretty beautiful.
That is pretty beautiful. Yeah. Okay. Again, forgive me here. So you brought your own food, but was the concession stand open?
It was. They had a ton of stuff, including, Jim, a pickle-flavored icy.
Huh. Okay.
That is a hard pass.
You had me, and then the pickle flavored ice.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Okay. Well, no, I'm so thrilled that you actually got to do this. In fact,
magical.
Our local drive-in in Milford is doing kind of the same thing, and I've been sort of monitoring what they're. Mind you, they were running Dirty Dancing, and I forget. I think Grease paired with it. So I'm hoping over the summer that we get that same thing, because again, I would just love to see a Star Wars movie in a drive-in. It's been years.
It's pretty enchanting.
But it's interesting. You mentioned previously the same drive-in showed Jaws and Harry Potter and the like, and of course those films featured the wonderful music of John Williams.
Yes.
And just this past week, I'm literally sitting. I normally work at the dining room table with my back to the television, and Nancy's watching television. Again, she's blipping around, and she stumbles upon I want to say it was WGBH, our public television channel out of Boston. They had decided to, again, given the disruption in the sort of broadcast food chain, to tap into their library to dig out some old classic shows. And what they did is they've dug out 5 special episodes of Evening at Pops. And I don't know if they ever played these in your part of the country, Dan, but they are, the Boston Pops Orchestra, these hour-long concerts. And of the 5 episodes that they decided to run, the one that Nancy caught totally by accident was from April 29th, 1980. It was John Williams' debut as the new conductor of the Boston Pops Orchestra. And again, the interesting thing is that John replaced Arthur Fiedler. I don't know if you're familiar with Arthur.
Extremely. His Christmas album is a staple at our house.
There we go. I was, the sleigh ride, the Leroy Anderson. But yeah, he passed away in July of 1979. That was his 50th year as the conductor of the Boston Pops. And Disney fans might know Arthur from when he directed the World Orchestra at the foot of Cinderella Castle during the grand opening celebration of Disney World back in October of 71. But Arthur was a New England institution. In fact, kind of ironic, for his 50th year as the conductor of the Boston Pops, he actually reaches out to John Williams and, asked him if he'd be available to write a special piece of music for his 50th anniversary. He was looking for some sort of new march to conduct. And John was flattered to be asked, but he had to beg off. He was in the middle of writing the score for a film at the time. I'm still trying to track down which film it might have been. Anyway, Williams was known to the Pops organization. He guest conducted the orchestra, in fact, ironically, twice in 79. But anyway, Arthur passes away in mid-July of 79. And, the question is, how do you replace an institution? How do you replace a guy who's been doing the job for 50 years? And the interesting, the Boston Pops organization, runs a very thorough search for candidates, and they're kind of all over the map. At one point, they consider Mitch Miller, the follow the bouncing ball sing along guy, but then because and as you mentioned, Arthur had done a best-selling series of recordings that featured the Boston Pops, and the organization really wanted to keep that going. And meanwhile, here's John Williams, who, again, had a very strong career as a guy who wrote scores for film. In fact, I was amazed. I was doing some digging into his early career, Dan, and there's so many things I never knew about John Williams. For example, do you remember the infamous the TV movie of Heidi in 1968 that was broadcast on NBC that disrupted the
yes.
John wrote the score.
Wow.
For that. So, that he was in the middle of all that. But he wrote music for Billy Wilder's Some Like It Hot. He was in the mix, very, very early on, and then of course wrote the scores for, Irwin Allen's, disaster movies, Poseidon Adventure and Towering Inferno. And, and so he was already, associated with big hits. And then he does Star Wars or for that matter, he 1-2 punch, he does Jaws and Star Wars. And it just takes things to a whole new level. So the Boston Pops organization is looking at, wow, Arthur's gone, so we're not going to sell as many albums. But look at this John Williams guy. I bet if he was, the director, I mean, look at these huge films he's worked on. I bet we'd sell a lot of albums. And so they go to Williams. He's very flattered, especially being asked to follow Arthur Fiedler. And he agrees to take the job. In fact, what you'll love, Dan, is he was in London recording the score for Empire when he signed his contract to lead the Boston Pops. And seriously, you have to chase down. Now that it's been broadcast by GBH, it's got to be out there. You got to find this, because for the opening night for his debut at the Boston Pops. All right. You have to understand, this is broadcast live on April 29th, 1980. And so Empire hasn't even opened in theaters yet. It won't open for another 3 weeks on May 21st. The first time people outside of the team that was working on the movie got to hear Yoda's theme and the Imperial March was there in Boston Symphony Hall that night.
Wow.
He played it live on stage for them. And then, kind of as the cherry on the sundae, he leaves the stage for a moment, and then who comes walking up the main aisle of the theater but Anthony Daniels in his full C-3PO outfit.
Wow.
And he steps to the podium, and he then suddenly rolling in from the side of the stage is R2-D2. And Anthony now begins to direct the Boston, the Boston Pops Orchestra in the Star Wars theme, but only every so often conceding a note to R2-D2. So he plays along with the orchestra. But yeah, it was John kind of doing exactly what the Boston Pops organization wanted him to bring a certain amount of star power to this 50-year-old organization. And I want to say that it went well. That his 13-year run as the head of the Boston Pops was trouble-free, but it was not. And that's large. And I say this as a New Englander, a proud, flinty New Englander, but the musicians in the Boston Pops Orchestra at that time were jerks. They had been on the job for a long time. They were protected by the Musicians Union. And more to the point, they kind of resented this Hollywood poser who came to town and was trying to replace Arthur Fiedler. So they didn't make life all that easy for John. And you have to understand that in the first 2 years he's on the job as the conductor of the Boston Pops Orchestra. The first year he writes the score for Raiders. The year after that he does, the score for E.T. I mean, this is a guy who's literally at the top of his career, but he has to fly back to orchestra and deal with these snotty musicians who frankly kind of resent the fact that whenever they'd open a list of what they were going to be playing that night, there'd be a John Williams number sitting there in the middle of it. And it's like, oh, we're going to play his music, this Hollywood guy. And not understanding that it was actually the Boston Pops organization that was insisting to John, could you put in one of some music that you wrote into every program? Because that's what the people who are buying the tickets to come to the show expect. They want to see John Williams, play the Raiders march, or they want to see, you do the theme from E.T. And the musicians would do things like when the selections would be announced that they'd hiss, and the thing is with people hissing, you can't really see who's making the noise, but it was very disrespectful to the conductor. And the weird part is John took it till June of 1984. And then he abruptly resigned and just sort of cited the discipline of the orchestra and the fact that some of the members of the orchestra had been very reluctant to rehearse as the reason that he was stepping away from the position. And the heads of the Boston Pops organization kind of stepped in and negotiated a truce, so to speak. And after finding several very vocal, reluctant to rehearse members of the orchestra and removing them, which, by the way, did not go over well with the Boston's Musicians Union, John returned, and also because he was still keeping his full work schedule out in Hollywood. He was still doing, scores for Stevens films and George's films. They agreed to sort of trim off a few concerts on either side of the beginning of the season and the end of the season. So, he could continue to focus on his work. And John then stayed on for another 9 years. But finally, in 1991, he announced that, the commute was getting to be a bit much. And he wanted to actually go from conducting to writing serious music while continuing to do his film stuff. So he announced in 91 that he'd be stepping down as the head of, the Boston Pops in 93. And then there was sort of a victory lap. But they were still Boston musicians who were jerks, who just talked about how the then 62-year-old Williams was, he's stepping down because he's lost his chops. And, he's, so, and again, just to sort of nail home how wrong they were, in 1994 is, of course, when John's score for Jurassic Park, came out.
And that little independent film.
Yeah, there barely anything that people paid attention to. And then, but the interesting thing is John did enjoy, as part of his job, working with the Tanglewood organization and arranged to stay on as the conductor with Tanglewood. And to this day, he still goes out to the western part of Massachusetts, and he loves working with those musicians. He's continued to do it. And, of course, Keith Lockhart came on as the new conductor of the Boston Pops. And with some great pleasure, I want to point out the irony that the best, and during John's time as the head of the Boston Pops, they had many best-selling albums. But during Keith Lockhart's run, the best-selling album that the Boston Pops has ever done, in fact, this came out in 2017, Lights, Camera, Action. It was a celebration of 60 years of John Williams music. So, on behalf of the jerks on the Boston Pops Orchestra who made John Williams' life less enjoyable than it should have been, it's like, on you guys.
Yeah.
And,
that's called sour grapes and jealousy.
Yeah. But at the same time, it was just, honestly, Dan, you have to chase this down because just to see, C-3PO. And again, I have to go back and read my copy of I Am C-3PO to see if he actually talked about, conducting the Boston Pops, because I can't imagine just walking out on stage with the limited sight lines of that costume, let alone climbing up to the podium. And he really does conduct well. I mean, he did, it almost looked like Anthony had classical training.
I've actually been in that theater, and not when John Williams was there, but I've been in that theater. Mm-hmm. And then I've seen in Chicago, I saw John Williams conduct the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily, that's kind of loosely related to what you're talking about, but I saw the respect and the love, because I was sort of expecting a little snobbery from the theater types in Chicago because they're used to seeing classical, this and that. But John Williams, made it mainstream and put a flourish on it that is unprecedented, I think, in the history of music. And there's nothing but love in that theater, and I'm glad to see that is sort of that shift has changed because he deserves that.
Oh, I totally agree. But I was looking at the lights, camera, action setup, and what's fascinating is the last 5 selections on this Boston Pops recording are actually from The Force Awakens.
Wow.
So I mean, again, what was interesting is that Williams himself evidently helped pick out the music, and so he steered away from, in fact, I was reading an interview with him where he talked about how, he wants to give the audiences what they expect, or what they expected when they come to a Boston Pops concert. But at the same time, he said, I don't want to play the Shark song. It's just sort of like, I get tired of playing the Shark song. So that's what's interesting about Lights, Camera, Action is that he's got, for example, the music he wrote for Steven Spielberg's The Terminal in there, which, by the way, is a pretty decent Tom Hanks movie if you haven't seen it.
Yeah,
so,
agreed.
All right. Well, anyway, seriously, though, if you get the chance, folks, head over to YouTube or poke around online. Somebody somewhere has to have grabbed this and thrown this up online. But again, it's the April 29th, 1980 concert for the Boston Pops, John Williams' debut. In fact, there's a wonderful, the Burgess Meredith, it has like a 15-minute long narrative performance in front of the orchestra. That's well worth paying attention to as well. But it's a wonderful, hour-long presentation, and it's worth it alone to look at the clothes and the hairstyle because, man, we dressed bad back then. So, anyway, all right, but to transition from bad to good stuff. You're always doing such great stuff over on Coffee with Kenobi. Oh, by the way, before I forget, I wanted to mention I really enjoyed the most recent teaching with Star Wars. Your piece about Anakin and Obi-Wan's conflict in Attack of the Clones. That was an interesting thing to try to dig out there.
Yeah, my thought process with these is to just try to find teachable moments. They don't necessarily always go well, but it's important to get it from the perspective of the teacher and the learner, because I think we both are all of those things at different times in our lives, and so I appreciate that.
No. Again, it's just a continually strong series, and folks, if you're not reading them, you should be going over to StarWars.com to check these out. But at the same time, you're also doing great stuff over at Coffee with Kenobi. What have you been up to lately over there?
Well, we've been looking because it was I believe it's been 6 months since the release of The Rise of Skywalker, so we kind of looked at in the short term how that film has aged and how our perspectives have looked at it. We did a thing where we recorded some stuff live at the drive-in talking about The Empire Strikes Back, and then I just today I released an episode looking back at Star Wars Rebels because Mason finished that series for his first go-around last week. So there was a lot of interesting conceptual stuff on my mind about that. So it was really fun to talk about basically things that we thought Rebels brought into the Star Wars universe and into storytelling. And then next week, here's the scoop that no one knows yet. I sat down with Ahmed Best for about 45 minutes, and It was a spectacular interview.
Holy cow, Jar Jar.
Yes, and the man is truly a gentleman and a scholar. He talked about film and etymology and just he's an intellectual, and I had the best time speaking with him.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
In fact, I have to say that was honestly, I wish I had been there for the Star Wars celebration in Chicago. That was the one where he finally got some recognition from fans, right?
Wonderful ovation. Yeah, he's very cool dude.
Oh, I cannot. Whoa. No. That's something definitely go out of your way for, folks. Holy cow. That's great. My side of the fence. Yeah, we have our shows as well. We got Disney Dish with Len Testa, and the Len's basically living in the parks right now, trying to get a handle on how the Disney parks operate in this coronavirus era. And we're trying to do something similar. Myself and Dustin Fuse with the Universal Joint podcast, and but again, kind of hard to do from New Hampshire. But meanwhile, you mentioned Aaron Adams. We do the Marvel Us Disney podcast with him, and he also edits a lot of the podcasts here at the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network. And then, of course, we have Drew Taylor, who, by the way, want to work in a plug. He's got his Galaxy Nucleus. Art of Pixar's Onward this Saturday. It's a Zoom conference with him and two of the visual development artists for that Dan Scanlon film. And again, Drew has some amazing stories about this, and well worth checking out. I want to say it's 2:00 Los Angeles time, so check that out. And also, finally got a brand new episode of I Want That Up with Shelley Valladolid. And again, it's kind of a challenging time to do something about merch, but we're in there swinging, folks. I'll tell you what, folks, if you could do both Dan and I a favor, if you could head over to iTunes and rate and recommend not only looking at Lucasfilm, but also Coffee with Kenobi, that would be incredibly helpful. Likewise, if you really, really, really like what you heard here, if you could subscribe to Bandcamp, that helps. And Dan, again, always great fun to follow what you're up to on social media. I want to remind folks where they can find you there.
Sure, you can find me personally on Twitter at Mr. Zehr, MRZEHR, and Coffee with Kenobi is all over social media, so please follow us and like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and subscribe to our channel on YouTube.
And I would be remiss. We should promote your Patreon effort, the pour over.
Oh yes, we just wrapped up our top 15 favorite movies of all time, and now we've moved into top 15 favorite fictional characters, and we went all over the place with films, with plays, with comic books, with sitcoms, with comic book strips. I mean, all over the place. It was quite daunting, actually.
15 favorite characters.
Yeah,
wow.
Just fictional characters. And I had all the people from, like, of course, there were a few Star Wars characters sneak in, but I even had added Inspector Clouseau and just fun, fun fictional characters that leave an impression that you don't want to. Basically, when you're experiencing this time with that character, whether it's you're reading it or watching it, you don't want that time to end, and so that kind of inspired this.
Oh, that's cool. I forgive me for asking. Elwood P. Dowd make the cut?
Number 16. Yeah, just missed.
Oh, damn it. Okay. Well, okay. Speaking of which, a quick again to give you some idea of why Tom Hanks is the nicest, smartest actor in Hollywood. A couple of years ago, I want to say it's Universal that has the rights to remake Harvey. The play that features the character Elwood P. Dowd, and Steven Spielberg was like, "Oh, I'd love to do that." And so Spielberg actually, on Universal's behalf, approaches Tom Hanks because it's like, well, there's only one person in the world who could do that role as well as Jimmy Stewart. And Hanks, Spielberg shows up, he does the pitch, and Hanks says no. And it's like, and again, don't get me wrong, they're piling up money. Everybody in this is going to make a fortune because this is a guaranteed hit film. And it's like, no, I love what Jimmy Stewart did. I can't do anything as good as Jimmy Stewart did, as Elwood P. Dowd. Yeah, and then again, just the fact that, just said no, because it's like, no, that's one of my favorite performances. I'm not going to top that. There's no way I could top that. And what to the point it would ruin the film for me. So, anyway, that's not really a Star Wars story, but throw that in there for free. Okay. And Nancy, speaking of social media, Nancy wants me to remind you can find us on Twitter and Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and then on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. And I guess that's going to do it for now, Dan, though the fact that just 5 hours before we recorded this, we got that huge Star Wars related news. I have the uneasy feeling that more of these stories are going to pile up before we get around to recording a new looking at Lucasfilm. So
this is the weekend of San Diego Comic-Con's virtual con. So
God, you're right.
Could be a big day.
Okay, well, we'll be back with those stories on the next show, folks. But thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon.